Hello, today I'm going to be reading chapter 17 of Takeout by Margaret Maron. And also, new plant again! Woo! Yay! Chapter 17. Charlotte Randolph pushed back from the glass top table strewn with letters and photographs and press clippings that documented her public life. "I'm sorry, Marian. I just can't seem to concentrate today." "That's okay," her assistant said cheerfully. "We're ahead of schedule. If you like, I could finish putting those interviews in chronological order." "No, take the rest of the day off. Go check out that shoe sale. You've earned it. I'll try to get my thoughts in order. You've been sitting so long lately. You could probably use a good massage. Want me to call your therapist, see if she can come over?" "No, maybe I'll call her after lunch. You go." But when Marion Schmidt had gathered up her things and gone off with the shoe ad from the morning paper, Charlotte continued to sit at the table, lost in memory. The police interview had unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. When he was here on Tuesday, Jack swore he hadn't told anyone, but she found herself remembering that old warning. Two people can keep a secret if one of them be dead. Well, Jack was dead, but how many other secrets were hidden in the papers spread out before her? And how many of those secrets would she take to her own grave? She squared her small shoulders decisively. Maybe it was time to find out. Founded in 1987, Vanderlyn College occupied a leafy green space overlooking the East River that was 2 blocks wide by 8 blocks long. Unlike other institutions of higher learning where real estate was less valuable, none of these stone building were dormitories or faculty residences, although there was a central grassy commons where students crisscrossed to classes on patterned brick walks or perched on the broad rim of the fountain to eat lunch in the shade of several large oaks. 2 years earlier, detectives Albee and Lowry had taken part in a murder investigation in Vanderlyn's art department, but their activities had been confined to Van Hoen Hall, and they had never become fully oriented, but a student pointed them toward Stuyvesant Hall, which was where they had arranged to meet Grace Landers and Abner Ferguson. Inside the building, they squeezed onto a crowded elevator that let them off in front of double doors marked faculty only. The doors opened into a wide covered terrace that looked out over the river and was furnished with wrought iron tables and chairs. On this warm June day, most of the chairs were occupied. Lieutenant Harold had described to them the couple that she'd seen entering the Randolph home, so they spotted almost immediately what had to be Charlotte Randolph's niece and stepson at a table next to the railing. Both had their backs to the glare coming off of the water. The woman appeared to be in her late 30s, and from the gray hairs at the man's temples, he was probably early 40s. They made an attractive couple, and their smiles were friendly, without a hint of uneasiness at being asked to meet with the police. "Hope you don't mind if we go ahead with lunch," said Grace Landers, opening clear plastic clamshells that held green salads. She wore her light brown hair parted in the middle and tucked back behind her ears, but a breeze off the river kept loosening different strands. "I hold office hours from 1 to 3, and I'm teaching a graduate seminar then myself," said her husband, a slender black man with a pencil mustache who used a penknife to open their packets of dressing. As they ate, they explained that he specialized in 18th century American literature, while she was the deputy chair of the math department. I'm afraid I can't say anything intelligent about either subject, Lowry confessed. Dr. Abner Ferguson smiled. Neither can a lot of our students. I hope this isn't about one of them. Didn't Mr. Randolph tell you? Both professors gave them blank looks. Charlotte, tell us what? Let's back up a bit, said Albie. Ms. Randolph told us that you often bring her supper. Yes, said yes, Dr. Ferguson seemed puzzled by her question. Did you bring her food this past week? They nodded. Lasagna, said Ferguson. She loves pasta, but very seldom orders it for herself. Trying to preserve her girlish figure, said Landers with an indulgent smile as she speared a cherry tomato. Almost 80, but still in the game. We stop in to check on her every week or so, and we usually take her something. I guess you know that she's my grandmother's sister and that Gus is the son of her third husband. Or her fourth husband, he said, pushing aside a ring of red onion. Charlotte claims she can't remember which. Landers gave a rueful shake of her head. We've never understood why she would bother with a ceremony, since none of her marriages ever lasted more than 18 months. The lasagna the lasagna you brought for her was from Giuseppe, right? The laughter faded from their faces at the seriousness of Lorry's tone. What's this about, Detective? 2 men were found dead on a bench on the 6th Avenue at the end of her street. Oh no, said Grace Landers. Please don't say it was gang-related. That's always been such a safe street. No, this looks personal. Their food was poisoned. Poisoned? I don't understand. 2 takeout boxes were given to those men Tuesday evening. Warfarin was found in both boxes. Landers, who had been frowning, immediately looked relieved. Oh well, that lets us out. We took Charlotte's lasagna to her on Monday. Did you see her eat any of it? Well, no. She put it in that little refrigerator in the butler's pantry to have it later. She never ate it, said Albie. One of those 2 men visited her Tuesday evening, and she sent your lasagna home with him. Really? Who was he? A man named Jack Bloss, who used to be a stagehand at the Met. He brought her a program from the night she went on for the Star. He told her he'd missed lunch, so she gave him your lasagna. He stopped to eat it on that bench, and next morning he was dead. Landers seemed both shocked and bewildered. I don't understand. How did that happen? How could someone get into Charlotte's house and... Her husband reached for her hand. They think we did it, babe. Don't be silly, Gus. Why would we poison a man we never heard of? But then she saw the looks the detective exchanged. That's crazy. Your aunt's a wealthy woman, said Lowry. If she dies, who inherits? Juilliard, Landers answered promptly. I may get her jewelry, but everything else she has been earmarked for their scholarship programs. Do you think we'd try to kill her for money? Ferguson sounded incredulous. Do you know who Gus is? Asked Landers, who suddenly seemed more relaxed. She nested their empty salad boxes, and her husband took them over to a nearby garbage pail. His great-grandfather was Raymond Howard. Howard Metalworks, pipes and cables. Remind me how much your grandfather got when he sold the company, hon? Dr. Ferguson shrugged. I forget. Enough to give my 6 cousins and me tidy nest eggs, all reinvested in blue-chip stocks. Last time I checked my portfolio detectives, it was a little over 20 million. So no, we wouldn't kill Charlotte for her money. They were stunned. But your teachers, said Lowry, and pretty damn good ones, too, if I do say so. Not all trust fund babies lead he- head-on hedonistic lives, his wife murmured. Ferguson grinned. In the late 1700s, John Adams wrote his life a letter. In it, he said he had to study politics and war so that their sons might have the liberty to study mathematics and philosophy so that their grandsons could study painting and literature. He leaned back in his chair and gestured to the halls of learning that surrounded them. I'm John and Abigail's black grandson, Detective Lowry. Did they know Mattie Mootone? Sigurd asked when Lowry and Albie finished reporting. They said not, Albie said. They looked up as Tilly entered the squad room with a gray-haired woman who dabbed at her tear-swollen eyes with a wad of tissues. Lieutenant, this is Mrs. Woods. She's just formally identified our second victim. Jack Bloss was her brother. Dealing with grief-stricken relatives was still the most uncomfortable part of the job for Sigrid, but she tried. We're so sorry for your loss, Miss Woods. She gestured for Tilly to bring a chair. Please sit down. Do you feel up to talking about him? Answering a few questions. The woman nodded tearfully, and Sigrid signaled for Hans and Tilly to join them. Can we get you something? Tilly asked. Coffee? Water? Without waiting for an answer, Dinah Urbanska promptly fetched a bottle from the break room. When Lieutenant Harold didn't dismiss her, she slid her own chair closer to them so she could hear. Woods unscrewed the cap and took a sip of water, then set the bottle on the floor beside her. She took fresh tissues from the box that Sigurd offered and turned them over and over in her restless hands, shredding them as she talked about her brother. The shock of learning about his death, the disbelief that someone would poison him. Unlike her ex-sister-in-law, her words came hesitantly. No, she could offer no reason why someone might want Jack dead. Were they sure it wasn't an accident? Or another heart attack? He had a pacemaker. Maybe he took too many of his pills. We're pretty sure it was in the food, Sigurd said. Someone gave him lasagna that had coumadin in it. Lasagna? Jack's last meal was lasagna? More tears welled up in her eyes. Yes, Sigurd said, puzzled as to why that mattered. Jack liked Italian food okay, but lasagna wasn't one of his favorites. He didn't care for tomato sauce, poor guy. Did you ever hear him speak of Charlotte Randolph? Miss Woods nodded. Not in years, though. Jack got me in backstage to hear her sing once when he was working at the Met, and he introduced us. Wonderful voice and not a bit snobby. Did they have an affair? Jack wasn't married then, she said, defensively, and neither was she. Did it last long? She shook her head. Things never lasted long with Jack, I'm afraid. My brother was a sweet man, Lieutenant, and he had many good qualities, but monogamy wasn't one of them. Their affair was long over by the time he moved down to Broadway and met Mary, and she gave them a startled look. Mary, his ex-wife, did she know about Jack? Did you talk to her? We did, said Tilly. She managed a weak smile. I can imagine what she had to say about him, but she wanted the marriage, wanted to stop working. As I said, women never lasted long with Jack, but Mary played him like a trout. Wouldn't let him put his hand up her skirt till he'd put a ring on her finger. We were both dressers on Skirts Ahoy, but actors didn't like to use her if they could help it, because she talked too much. It's hard to stay in character if someone's chattering in your ear like a magpie when you're trying to remember your next lines while you change costumes. She was pretty, though, and sexy and sexy, and after an evening of too many martinis, they eloped. He was ready to call it quits after 3 months, but by then she was pregnant. They stayed together 12 years for the sake of the boy, till they were both so sick of each other that her eyes widened, then filled with tears again. "Jackie," she whispered. Mary was ready to have his IV tubes removed a month after the accident. "Now she'll get her way, won't she?" She reached blindly for the box of tissues again. "I'm sorry." In his heart of hearts, Jack knew that Jackie was never going to open his eyes again, never going to get up out of that bed. But he just couldn't let the boy go. Maybe it's best. 19 years and she barely visited him. And she certainly didn't help with the expenses. Jack had a good pension from the union, but she got part of it in the divorce settlement, and after the accident, it took almost every penny he had to keep Jackie in that nursing home. She blew her nose and gave them an apologetic smile. "But this isn't what you need to know, is it? You said Charlotte Randolph? I don't think they'd been in touch for years. Why did he go see her?" She said he brought her the program from the night she went on for the Star after the accident. Woods gave a crooked smile. "Oh yes, that famous accident." "What do you mean?" Sigurd asked. "Nothing," said Miss Woods. "Nothing." This east-facing room on the third floor had begun as a nursery. The first time Orla had seen it, fresh paper, patterned in colorful Mother Goose illustrations, covered the walls, and all the trim had been painted white. The windows had white shades and sheer white curtains. The crib, rocking chair, changing table, and chest of drawers were white enamel, and although the chest held diapers and a few neutrally colored outfits, everything else was bare. No cushions, no colorful accessories. "My wife wanted to wait until we knew which it was," Benny Delvico had said, pointing to two large piles of shopping bags from various midtown department stores. One pile held blue items, the other pink. "Send the blue things back and make this room fit for a princess." Although she had been hired 2 months in advance, Orla's first day on the job had made it felt like a baptism by fire. Except for a driver who shared a room in the basement with Delvico's bodyguard, there was no other help in the house. The cook and maid had either quit or been fired, so there was no one to tell her the lay of the land, and she was much too intimidated by her employer and the other two men to ask questions. Word had gone around a few months earlier that after years of trying, and now nearing 40, the wife of Benny Olds was expecting a baby, and a nursemaid would be required. Someone strong and unafraid of work. And not pretty, the crones of their community had whispered. The Orlando girl, they decided. She had been brought over from the old country 10 years ago to nurse an elderly aunt who had never learned English. The aunt had died, the uncle had remarried, and the second wife wanted her out of the house. Almost 30, with no dowry and no marital prospects in sight, she would make a perfect nursemaid for Sophia Delvico, they said, and Sophia had agreed. Although she had sailed through the first 7 months with barely a touch of morning sickness, the last 2 months had been difficult, she told Orla, and the doctor had prescribed bed rest and no strenuous activity. Wrapped in a fluffy white comforter, she had interviewed Orla from the depths of a blue velvet recliner in the master bedroom on the second floor, which was where she received all her visitors now that she was no longer allowed to use the stairs. Orla's competence had been vouched for by the crones. She was neat, and her voice did not set Sophia's nerves on edge. More to the point, she was built like a fire hydrant. Her wiry dark hair did not invite a man's fingers, and those thick eyebrows could never be shaped into delicate arches. "My husband will let you know when the baby is born," she said. "I could start now," Orla said, eager to leave her uncle's house where she was no longer welcome. "No, you will come when the baby is born and not a day earlier. I won't have anyone hovering over me. Your salary will start today, though. Be ready to come when he calls." Orla's bags had been packed for a week when Benny Old's driver picked her up and deposited her at number 409. The next day, he and his wife brought their daughter home to this room that Orla had decorated with the pink things, right down to the fuzzy pink teddy bear she bought herself. The baby, christened Aria Mary, refused Sophia's breast, so it was Orla who got up in the night, who ran down the back stairs to warm the bottle, and who gave her heart so completely that her dry breasts tingled when the baby cried. Surely they would let down milk if she yielded to temptation, and pressed that tiny mouth to her nipples, but she did not dare. Although Sophia usually slept through, Signor Benito would occasionally come up to the nursery in those early hours and to hold out his arms to take over his daughter's feeding. She was still fearful of the man during the day, but here in the dimly lit nursery, listening as he rocked the baby and crooned Italian lullabies, she could almost pretend that Aria was their child. She did not love him, and she no longer wanted a husband, but this was a taste of what her life could have been, and it made her love the baby even more. That sweet-tempered baby had grown into a sunny golden child, then into a happily married woman. When her own daughter was born, Aria had persuaded Sophia to let Orla come help with Laura for the first month. Orla loved the new baby, but her breasts did not tingle when Laura cried. No warming bottles for this one, though. To Aria's delight, she suckled like a greedy little pig. Those were happy, peaceful years. Aria came into town at least twice a month to shop, to see the latest plays, to play cards with Sophia after dinner, and to help Orla tidy the kitchen after her mother went to bed. Her death had brought so much grief that Orla was now ready to admit that having Laura here was a good thing. Although she had shaken up the routine. On Saturday, while Orla stripped the room and Sal painted the walls, Aria had banished the Mother Goose paper when she turned 8. Laura had coaxed Sophia into shopping for new furniture. It was the first time Sophia had left the house for pleasure since the funeral, and the outing seemed to have done her good. "Spending money's always fun, isn't it, Nana?" Laura had teased. "Especially if it's someone else's money," Sophia had said dryly, but it was clear that she had enjoyed herself. Fresh linens for the bed and bath had been delivered only that morning, and as Orla slipped a pillow into a crisp new pillowcase, the front doorbell rang. Orla sighed and started for the door, but Laura was halfway down the stairs by the time she reached the hall. "I'll get it, Nana," she called to Ms. Delvicho, who was in the living room, half dozing over a book. The white-haired woman who stood on the top step was a stranger, but her smile was so warm that Laura immediately smiled back. Smiled with approval, too, at a woman who seemed comfortable with both her age and who she was. Her expensive haircut and stylish clothes flattered without trying to pretend that the body they covered was a size 4 and 40 years younger. There was something familiar about her, though. Something to do with the way she carried herself. That air of command. Like Nana, was Laura's subconscious thought. "Hello," the woman said. "Is Mrs. Delvicho in?" Is she expecting you? The girl countered. Tell her it's Charlotte Randolph. Laura's eyes widened in surprise, but before she could react, she heard her grandmother say in an icy voice, Show her in, Laura. Laura held the door wide, and the stranger passed her, then paused just inside the front room. Miss Delvico sat like a queen in a massive chair of intricately carved wood that faced the door. Charlotte, she said flatly. Sophia, the woman answered. Impossible to flatten the music still in her voice. Shall I bring you some tea? Asked Laura, or some of Orla's lemonade? No, said Miss Delvico without asking her visitor. Nothing. Close the door, Laura, and go back upstairs. And that's the end of chapter 17, and I'll see you tomorrow for chapter 18, and as always, have a wonderful day.